Hey guys, welcome back. And this episode, I planned on talking about just my mom and what happened with her, how she ended up leaving the family. Um, or leaving is too kind a word. Abandoning is probably a better word. Um, so when I was in, I want to say 6th grade, um, things in my home life kind of started to fall apart. My parents were not on good terms. Um, my dad was very depressed, um, and my mom had started seeing her driving instructor uh, while she was still married to my dad. Um, and rather than get a divorce, like sane, logical people, they just kind of stayed, and things got bad. Like, they were bad, but they got worse. And they started yelling at each other, screaming, and a lot of, uh, you know, accusations back and forth. And my dad was, like, very angry that my mom wasn't, like, uh, physically in the relationship anymore. In all honesty, I can't really blame her because he was just not taking care of himself. I mean, it's not fun to date someone who's very depressed and very, like, overweight, and it's a big ask. You got to take care of yourself. You can't expect your partner to do it for you. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you deserve to be cheated on. Um, so, yeah, my parents were fighting a lot of the time, and it's kind of in the middle of this fighting that I chose a side in the fighting. And up until this point, just for some context, um, my mom and I had a very distant relationship. Um, it was weird because there would be times when we were close, um, and then there would be years at a time where, like, very little involvement was going on. She wasn't very involved in my life from 4th grade through 6th grade. She was just kind of someone who was angry and cooking meals angrily at home. Not really someone who, like, asked how my day was going, or, when I was a lot younger, I remember she used to help me with my homework, but I think at some point the homework got too hard for her to help me with the homework. Um, so, I chose a side in their fighting. And up until that point in time, I felt very disconnected from my mom. I had a closer relationship with my dad, but his depression kind of made me feel weird about him. I didn't. Uh, I kind of sided with my mom a little bit, or maybe I, like, sensed my mom, like, pulling away, and I wanted that connection back that I didn't have. Um, or maybe, it was easier to be angry at my dad in that scenario than my mom, because on some level I sensed that if I sided with my dad, my mom would be scarier than my dad would be. So I took my mom's side in the fighting, and this was kind of the beginning of the hardest period in my life. Was, like, everything that transpired as my parents split up, and things just kind of continuously got worse. Um, so my parents would start fighting, and I would kind of join in the fighting, and the cops got called a couple times. And I remember one of the time we were fighting was because my dad bought tickets to a show to take me, and I didn't want to go to the show with him, and he was like crying, and it was really sad. And the police came. I mean, it's a lot of trauma, like all of our collective traumas interacting with each other. Um, and I feel very guilty for that period of my life. Um, when I pulled away from my dad, I mean, I had my reasons, but you know, I feel like I owe him for not being there for him at that time, or not understanding what he was going through. Um, but yeah, so my dad moved out, and we spent a little while um, living in that same residence. It was the first floor of a two-family house, and at some point we couldn't afford to live there anymore, and we moved into an apartment building that was very run down. Um, it was very small, and there were four of us living there. It was me and my two siblings and my mom, and it was very tiny. Um, I lived in a room with my brother, and Amy uh, lived in a room with my mom, which would turn out to be like very traumatizing for her for reasons I'll probably get to. Um, and yeah, so we moved into this tiny little shithole apartment, and I'll give it to my mom. It was very clean. She cleaned a lot. She was very on top of things um, in terms of cleaning. I mean, it was like to our detriment. Like she would throw out our stuff all the time because it was on the floor. But you know, clean is clean. Um, it'd just be nice if she was like considerate while cleaning. But you know, she's gone now, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. Um, but lived there for a while, and things just kind of got worse. My mom was seeing not a therapist, but a psychic who practiced Santeria. So, just for a little, you know, aside backstory, my mom had been seeing a therapist, same therapist my dad was seeing, but he passed away shortly after September 11th. And after that, my mom never looked for another therapist. She just kind of gave up on therapy. So she found this psychic woman through uh, one of the moms that she met through one of my personal friends, if that makes sense. And the combination of the psychic woman who it turns out recommended that shithole apartment because it was close to her, and my mom's mental health getting worse, the way she started treating me and my sister really got out of control. Um, she started accusing me of having sex with just girls I knew, and she, you know, accused my friends of doing hard drugs, um, and she systematically cut me off from all of my friends, and she put me in a really dark place. And while this is going on, she's seeing the Santeria lady who's telling her crazy things. Um, and one of the things the Santeria lady did was she started stealing from my mom. And she would come to our apartment and just steal money from my mom. So she started telling my mom that my sister was taking money from her to cover up for her stealing. So my mom started accusing Amy of stealing from her when she wasn't stealing. And while she was doing this, she was also doing the same thing of like trying to cut off, um, my sister from having friends, doing social things, going out. Um, so we were all in a pretty dark place. Um, I found out years later that my sister kept a diary and frequently talked about killing herself during that time, which is like really hard for me because, had I known she felt that way, I would have been able to do something, but I didn't at the time. Um, so things were generally getting worse, and in the middle of my 8th grade year, I kind of closed myself off entirely from my friend group. I started playing World of Warcraft about 12 hours every day. Pretty much every second that I was home, I was playing World of Warcraft to distract myself from what was going on. And it started to damage my circadian rhythm. Like it started to rupture my ability to function as a person. I would start sleeping through school. Actually, I don't even really know when I was sleeping. Um, I think I would sleep during the day when my mom was awake and wake up at night, so that way I knew I was safe because she always went to sleep at 10 o'clock. So I had completely mentally checked out. Um, and I was staying up at night, doing my homework in the early hours of the morning, going to school, coming home, and sleeping until 10 the next night. I'd set up my whole life around avoiding my mom. Um, and this went on for another year, just about. It went on all through my freshman year of high school. And at some point, um, I realized I didn't want to live there anymore. And it coincided with my mom's mental health getting to the point where even I had to acknowledge that she wasn't really fit to parent me anymore, that she was just kind of so far gone. Um, I remember one day in particular where her neighbor died in Israel, and she sat on the couch and she cried hysterically. I mean, she wasn't like she wasn't even mourning like the person. She was just in hysterics, talking about how young she was. And I was holding my mom while she was crying, and I got this real intense feeling like I'm the parent. It's a weird thing that I imagine people later in their life probably experience, but I was experiencing it at like 14 years old, just like I am the adult in this situation, and it hit me very heavily. Um, and this also coincided with me realizing I didn't want to play WoW anymore. I had a teacher who took us outside to meditate, and one of the things I realized while I was meditating was that I no longer wanted to play World of Warcraft. I wanted to, live my life, and I wanted to see things. Um, and so I, um, I quit WoW, and after I quit WoW, I started to realize how bad things had gotten, like how far they'd gotten, and something I haven't really covered is how this entire time I'm living with my mother, it had been a couple of years at this point. I hadn't spoken to my father at all. I had completely cut him out of my life. Um, and he tried to get back in contact with me, but I'd avoided him. Um, and I decided that I couldn't live at my mother's anymore. So I did a couple of things. I went to the psychic's house and I said, I need you to stay away from my family. I need you to stay away from my mom. You've done a lot of damage. I don't want you to talk to them anymore. And she didn't take it well. She she said that it was something between my mom and me and that she didn't want to get involved, but at that point, she was already heavily involved. Um, After I went to the psychic's house, I went to my dad's house, and he only lived down the block. This was so strange about it. Was that my dad lives very close, and I had managed to not talk to him for so long. Um, but went down the block, and I went to go talk to him, and I told him about the psychic and how crazy things had been, and how he was accusing Amy of stealing, and how she accused me of having sex and kind of cut me off from all my friends, and how she was kind of going nuts. And everything that happened after that moment is kind of embedded in my mind as the last day I saw my mom, like the last time I saw her. So what happened was my dad took all three of us to his lawyer, and his lawyer asked us to say basically exactly what we told him. And there was a very intense legal battle going on between my parents for custody. I mean, my dad had spent something like 100,000 on lawyers at this point, and that was money he didn't have. Um, so, um, you know, we went to the lawyer and he wrote up a temporary restraining order against my mom, and they served it to her as she was going to pick up my younger brother from school. And I will forever remember this moment. Um, and I remember the look on her face as they handed it to her. I was sitting in the passenger side window, and she just looked horrified. Um, and I think that same day, my dad took the car to go to my mom's apartment and pick up my stuff. And I knew on some level this was the last chance I would ever have to get my stuff. So I went into the apartment, and my mom was just crying, like standing there crying in the corner, um, just crying, intensely, profusely crying, hysterically. Um, and was getting my things, and it was a very odd moment. It felt like in some ways I was getting her back for cutting me off from all my friends and forcing me to live the way I'd been living. Kind of like this meager, sad existence. But it was also a sad moment. It was a moment where um, I realized, things just weren't gonna be the same. Things were gonna be different. I mean, I'd never guessed what was actually going to happen, which was that she'd completely cut us off and never speak to us again. Um, but we got our stuff, we got in the car, and we took our stuff to our dad's house. And then that following day, we got a call from our friend's dad, who's the landlord, that our mom had thrown the rest of our stuff out um, in the trash. And my mom uh, threw every possession we didn't keep out. Um, she threw everything out. And it was raining that day. And we went outside to get our stuff. And amidst our stuff, we found all of our family photos cut up and in pieces. And we salvaged as much of it as we could, but we lost a lot of our history that day. A lot of our family photos were destroyed, and a lot of our stuff was destroyed by the rain. So in one day, it's like I lost my mom, I lost my whole family history, I lost my stuff, and that was a very, very painful day um, for me. Very painful. And we went back to my dad's house with the stuff, and we tried to glue together as many of the pictures as we could. We saved some of them. I still have some baby pictures, but a lot of that stuff is lost. And that was about, what am I? I'm 28 now. That was about 14 years ago since that happened. And I have spoken to my mom a total of 3 times since that day. Um, and I never got the answers that I wanted from her. Um, I think mentally she's so far gone that she couldn't provide them, even if I did still speak to her. But you know, my sense of her is that she was on the cusp of a full-scale mental breakdown for years, and that the events leading up to us moving into my dad's kind of kicked her over the edge to the point of no return. Um, and as someone who suffered from mental illness, you know, I sympathize with her. I know that mental illness is a painful thing, um, but I just can't imagine how she let things get that bad. I mean, she she tried to ruin all of our lives. She really did. Um, she tried to ruin all of our lives, and when it didn't work, when we put our foot down and said no, she threw the ultimate tantrum by completely cutting herself out of our life, by saying, "Oh, if my abuse isn't good enough for you, then I'm gone. I'm never going to speak to you again." And I can't, to this day, I can't fathom how someone could take that line of thinking, you know, against their own family. You know, that kind of like, I'll cut off my arm if it hurts you. You know, it's like the type of thinking that someone who's very damaged would have. And it's made me think about like what kind of trauma her parents must have put her through, and You know, I do to this day. I have some empathy for her. I think she was a very afraid and lost person, and that in the place of getting help, she turned to all the wrong people. Um, but you know, at the end of the day, we are responsible for how we treat other people, and she is responsible for a lot of abuse. She's never apologized for destroying everything, for throwing all of our things out, for cutting up our family photos, for going 10 years with radio silence. I mean, who does that? You know, even if you're the angriest you've ever been in your life, you would think that on a birthday or something, you'd say hello, and she had my number. She could have reached me at any time. And it was painful for me all those years to keep the door open for her, you know, because it invites a lot of negative feelings of like not being good enough. Um, and what's wrong with me? Why don't you talk to me? Like, was there something I did wrong? And you know, after all these years, um, I think I can put it to rest and just say, um, it's her. It's not me. I mean, in all honesty, I don't think it's ever been me, but as I mature, um, as I grow as a person, it gets easier to say it was her baggage. You know, it was her toxic coping mechanisms, her trauma, her illness, and not me. I loved her dearly, even though she was a terrible mother, even though she didn't believe in germs and she served us food that literally made us sick. Like, even though she ruined my life, she took away all my friends, she took away everything I had, and I still loved her. And it's it's easier for me to say it was her. It wasn't me. It was her. And you know, when you're abandoned by a parent, it puts a hole in you. Puts a hole in your heart. Puts a hole in your self-esteem. It puts a hole in your life, in your ability to wake up and be a person every day, and to look in the mirror and like the person you see. And it cuts even more if you know that you were intentionally abandoned. You know, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't like your parent was like a druggie, or that they couldn't care for you and they put you up for adoption. No, my mom wanted it to hurt. She did it intentionally to hurt me, to hurt my family. And you know, that type of behavior, no one deserves that. Doesn't matter what you went through, what you put someone through. Nobody deserves to be iced out like that, especially someone you consider family. Um, and I hope that anyone who's had to deal with abandonment um, can one day come to the conclusion that it was never them. You know, it was never you. It was their baggage. It was their trauma. It was their problem. You know, there was never anything missing for you. And even though it still hurts, a lot of the time. Um, Even though I have some days where I still think about my mom and think about getting back in touch with her. Um, I know that I'm better off just moving on with my life, meeting new people, bringing in new people into my life, and having healthier relationships. Because our relationship was not healthy. It may have been my first relationship in the world, but that doesn't mean it has to stay or that I can't have new ones or even better ones. Um, so that's about all I have to say about that. And truthfully, I don't really know what I'm going to talk about next time, but there will be a next time. And I'll see you then. Bye.